Okay, let's look at how filtrate is formed, and let's go through that whole process. This one will probably be in a two-part video talking about the filtrate. That way it's just not too long. So let's look at the first thing, which is a general overview on urine formation. Okay, the general overview, what we're looking at on urine formation, you can see what we have on here is the renal corpuscle is in this area. Okay, so that's going to include the renal capsule and the glomerular capillaries in the center. This filters it out in this area, which becomes filtrate or glomerular filtrate in this area. Then once it moves into the proximal convoluted tubule, it becomes tubular fluid. And as you can see by the purple arrows and the yellow arrows on here, those are representing tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. Okay. Now, I've mentioned this a few times in the past, and the reason I do is because it always confused me. Absorption, not reabsorption, but absorption occurs when substances first enters your body. Okay, so if I drink a glass of water or I eat a piece of bread and it gets into my digestive system, it will then absorb from my small intestine and enter into my circulatory system or the lymphatic system, whatnot. Okay, once it's in your system, and then your body through the kidneys filters it out and it becomes this tubular fluid. Okay, if we want to bring those nutrients or those various ions, whether it's sodium or calcium, whatever, and we want to bring them back into the body and not pee it out, we have to then reabsorb them. Okay, so the purple arrow on this one is referring to reabsorption or tubular reabsorption. The yellow arrow showing it going from the peritubular capillaries, that is tubular secretion. Okay, so your body is secreting something from the peritubular capillaries and secreting them into the tubular fluid to eliminate. And this is what you're going to see where some drugs can do this, where they're secreted into the tubular fluid. So this is your general direction. So proximal convoluted tubule, then it goes down the descending limb of the loop of Henle, comes back around, goes up the ascending. And remember, this is the region here where you've got your which is going to be located between those two arterioles. Okay, so this is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Then we get into your distal convoluted tubule, and of course we still have reabsorption and secretion throughout this whole process. Collecting tubules in this region, and then the collecting duct is in here. Now remember, the collecting tubule and the duct are also responsive to antidiuretic hormone. So that's your general overview of this. So let's look at, let me get rid of those. Let's look at the renal corpuscle first, and let's take a closer look at how what structures the fluid, the filtrate, the water has to go through. And in part 2, we'll talk about what causes the filtrate to go through. Okay, I know it's a little confusing on the way I'm describing it, but hey, you're used to me by now. All right, so here we've got your afferent arteriole coming in. You can see it's much larger in size. Efferent arteriole going out. The size of the afferent, the size of your afferent arteriole, let's see, which one was this? Nope, not that. I guess that one. Okay. The size of your afferent arteriole is going to regulate how much pressure is going to be within the glomerular capillaries, which is going to force water out. Okay. But we'll go into that a little bit more in detail. You can see the yellowish kind of structures on the glomerular capillaries. Those are called podocytes. Now, we've talked about your parietal layers. Like when we talked about your pleural lining for the lungs, we talked about your parietal layer or parietal pleura and visceral pleura, where we had 2 layers. Well, the glomerular capsule also has something like that. Not serous membranes, but you have the inside layer of the capsule in here. This is your parietal layer of the glomerular capsule. The visceral layer lines the capillaries. So the space in between the visceral and the parietal layer of the renal corpuscle, that is your glomerular capsule, or that's going to be the capsular space. That's where the filtrate's going to occupy and then drain out. Okay? So we're going to look at the podocytes and what that is and how everything has to leave the capillaries. So let's go to a little bit closer up so you can see this picture here. We're just zooming in on those sections, and that gives us this area. Okay? Now this is the glomerular capillary. Okay? As you can see, there's a bunch of these little tiny holes. Those are fenestrations. Remember, there's 3 types of capillaries. Okay? There's continuous, fenestrated, and sinusoidal on that one. So those holes allow water and solutes to squeeze out of the blood vessel, okay? But it's not just going through that. You also have, you can see this layer here. That's the basement membrane. Remember, endothelial tissue is an epithelial tissue which is has basement membranes. So any fluid or solute that has to come out through these holes, through the basement membrane, and through these little slots here. Okay? So here's a podocyte, that whole cell coming down. Those are podocytes. Those podocytes have these little pedicels, which are going to be these structures. And the filtration slits are going to be that slit in between those. That's going to be the filtration slit. So water and solute has to first go through the endothelial, then it has to diffuse through the basement membrane, then it has to fit through the filtration slits of the pedicels and podocyte in order for it to get into the capsular space. So now let's look at this area just a little bit closer. All right, so now we just did a cross section. So the left side of the picture, that's inside the capillary. You can see red blood cells, you can see a white blood cell, various proteins. These are the fenestrations. Those are those little round holes, remember? These are those little round holes on that part. So water goes through here. This is the basement membrane that the water and solutes have to diffuse through. And these are the pedicels. And in between these are the filtration slits. Okay? So the purpose of all this is to basically allow water, ions, smaller molecules to come out and retain larger ones. So you want to keep proteins in here, because if you can see the size of that protein, this protein's not going to go through that hole. All right? So you're definitely not going to get red blood cells going through there unless you've got damage to the kidney. There can be blood pressure issues, there can be diabetic issues, there could be a lot of different things, okay? But the whole purpose of this is to maintain and keep things inside the capillary while allowing water and then the smaller things, and you can see a whole list of them on that. So that's what we're looking at, and I think that covered this. So the next up, what I want to cover is the formation of the filtrate itself. What's causing the fluid in here to come out, and how is that regulated? So that's going to be the next video, so stay tuned.